my last question. In your book, you say the country may be ready for big steps. What are your reasons for hope?
So since roughly 1970, there has been this tendency, both at the federal and state level and in many parts of the country, in cutting taxes and curbing investment in human capital. And this was a strategy that, for a time, was plausible, that one could argue that, okay, some southern states cut taxes, cut regulations, and factories genuinely did move to those states from the northern industrial states. It did seem to be working. I think that it's now pretty clear that that model has failed, both because of the environmental degradation that has resulted, and because when you don't invest in schools, then, South Carolina schools are a catastrophe. And it's no accident that Amazon and Apple are not moving to South Carolina. Human capital is what is the basis for growth these days. And so the southern states had gained ground on the rest of the country for much of the 20th century. Since, in more recent decades, they've been losing ground in ratio of per capita incomes again. And so I think that one issue is that the model of cutting taxes and cutting investments has, to some degree, failed. In Kansas, the idea that Kansas would actually vote to increase taxes because schools were so bad, that felt to me like maybe it's a turning point. And I hope so. So that's one reason why I wonder if we are ready to reinvest in America. And another just is the fact that the Republican Party in particular is going through this complete reorientation. Trump's Republican Party is completely different from George W. Bush's. Deficit spending is not an issue anymore. And the fact that some of these public investments, like childcare, like early childhood education, poll so well, and in fact have been introduced to some degree in red states. Oklahoma has a great early childhood program. Makes me think that we may finally be ready to take a new course for the country. And we wrote Tightrope in part to try to feed that interest and whack on the head some people who don't yet see that.
Sheryl, what's your reasons for hope?
I think that we never before have had so much research and evidence that shows that there are solutions to a lot of these problems. I mean, I think that, for the past few decades, people say, well, we don't really know what works. So when we launched the war on drugs, actually Portugal embarked on another experiment that no one knew which one would work. Well, Portugal did, so what we did is we actually threw everybody in jail who had anything to do with drugs, and so we just built more jails. We thought that was the solution. What Portugal did was they chose the public health toolbox, and they basically said that we will treat drug addiction like a health problem. And so they took all these people and they put them in drug treatment. And they had, safe needle exchanges. They did all sorts of things to really help people get help. And so now they've dropped the, heroin overdose rate by 2/3. They have the lowest drug overdose rate in Europe. It's not zero yet, but they still have done remarkably well. So we see that works. We have, results. We have data now. We have so much more data in all of these other areas that shows that we actually are ripe for change. We can rely on these solutions. And I also think there's growing recognition that capitalism isn't working for everybody. When you get, so we were talking to a great economist, Alan Kruger, who is at Princeton. Unfortunately, he's passed away, but we were talking to him for this book, and he was the chief economist for the Council on Economic Advisors to Obama, a really brilliant labor economist. And we were asking him, kind of gently, don't you think that, the low-income segment of society, like how do they, I mean, this economy really isn't favoring them, right? And he thought for a moment, he said, the economy is definitely rigged against them. So he had such a perfect overview of the entire economy, and he says, yes, it's rigged. And then you get someone like Ray Dalio. There can't be a more capitalist person in America than Ray Dalio, who runs the largest hedge fund in the world. And he says capitalism is broken because he sees that it isn't working for a large part of America. So I do think that there's this growing recognition that we need to fix things.